Hey everyone, Howard Deerhauser here alongside my dad, Dr. Richard Deerhauser. In today's video, we are going to talk about the powerhouse of the cell called the mitochondria. So the mitochondria literally create all of the energy for our body and our cells to function properly. And we have trillions of cells in our body that need a lot of energy in order to fulfill their unique responsibilities. So in this video, we want to talk about the mitochondria in a little more depth, but more specifically, what can you do to improve the performance of your mitochondria? That way your body has an elevated amount of energy to do its job. Now, what we've talked about before and what we've seen with our health coaching clients is that when our mitochondria, which again are the little engines within our cells that create all of the energy, when they start to break down, our bodies start to break down. So if they're not creating enough energy, we start to feel fatigued, we start to look older, we start to get different health conditions. So there's a lot that can go wrong if your mitochondria aren't functioning properly. So Dad, let's get into this. Can you talk a little bit more about the mitochondria and some of the latest research surrounding the mitochondria?
Yes, well, the mitochondria are a key to health. Now, the mitochondria, knowledge of the mitochondria, my science book, when I was in third grade, which is a hell of a long time ago, my science book, they showed the picture of the cell and these little bean-like structures inside the cell called the mitochondria. And the process that the mitochondria use to make energy, chemosmosis, was awarded the Nobel Prize, way back in the 50s. So this is something that's not new. What's new is that we've learned more about how the mitochondria decline over time. And what you may not know, although it's getting to be known more and more, because the mitochondria are really a huge topic, but in science, mitochondria have really been studied a lot less than like drugs in medical science. Drugs have been studied way more. Mitochondria, tiny percentage of the medical, biomedical research has been on mitochondria, but that's starting to increase. We have journals now called mitochondria, but the mitochondria have their own DNA. So the DNA in a mitochondria is in a circle, and the DNA inside our cells is in the nucleus, and we have the chromosomes of the DNA inside the nucleus. So in a mitochondria, the DNA is in circles inside the mitochondria. Now that's exactly how a bacteria has these circles of DNA. So it's thought that actually mitochondria were bacteria, that originally they got engulfed. That's process is called endosymbiosis. So the one organism engulfed another organism, and that other organism eventually became a motor to help build energy in the organism and allowed the energy to become more complex. Because the more complexity you have, the more energy you need. And you know what the most complex organism is on Earth and maybe in the entire universe? It's a human being. So we're kind of the pinnacle of this complexity that was allowed because of this endosymbiosis, which is this mitochondria making extra energy. But it's a lot more than just making energy. The mitochondria, has those genes, but let's say that you think about the structure of the mitochondria, a lot of the proteins that are in the mitochondria are coded for from genes in the nucleus. So these mitochondria have been with us a long time, but they kept 13 genes to themselves. And that is the wiring diagram of our power plant. So the wiring diagram of our power plant is in the mitochondria. And that's how we make energy. Now, the trouble with that circular DNA is it's way more prone to damage. So the mitochondria being our strength, it's also our weak point. So it's why we focus on it so much with our health coaching clients, because this is where the money is. Medicine doesn't know this, I mean, except for a few, the godfather of mitochondrial research, Doug Wallace, he knows that 85 to 90% of all of our complex diseases now are related to the mitochondria. Back when I was in medical school, we thought of the only things that affected mitochondria were the genetic diseases, which were very rare. So all these things like diabetes, cancer, Alzheimer's disease, osteoporosis, osteoarthritis, autoimmune diseases, all these diseases have an origin in this mitochondria. So this circular DNA is highly susceptible to mutations. And so it mutates at a much more rapid rate than our nuclear DNA that's very protected. So our problems begin here, and how this energy is being produced in this mitochondria affects how our nuclear genome expresses itself. So you can see that's why it's the root of most of our diseases and most of our problems. So it's our huge focus here when we're working with our health coaching clients or working on our own health.
Right. And like you said, mainstream medicine hasn't really studied the mitochondria all too much in terms of how the circular DNA is affected by our environment and our lifestyle. So I think it's important that we share some of the different causes of why this DNA gets damaged so easily and what causes all of these mutations, because this isn't just affecting your life either. And what I mean by that is the mitochondria are actually passed down the maternal line. So the mother passes down the mitochondria to her child, when it's being born. So what's important to know in terms of what are the causes for this mitochondrial damage?
Well, as you mentioned, we get our mitochondria from mom, and that's because the sperm doesn't donate any mitochondria. So the mitochondria are in the egg. Now this is important, and this is kind of a side shoot, but this is what allows life to evolve faster, because these mitochondria, they mutate more, so they can mutation can be good or bad. So a mutation, if it's good, it helps you adapt to our environments. And that's one of the reasons humans were able to go to all corners of the earth and inhabit those areas in a healthy way, because our mitochondria change very rapidly. And the process is, mom has a bunch of combinations of mitochondria in her eggs that are going to be her children. But as those eggs sit in the ovary, the ones that have combinations of genes, of the mitochondrial genes that are bad, are sacrificed. So there can be some huge changes going on, but all the ones that would create, a mutated baby or a baby that, isn't going to survive, they die right there in the ovary. This is a process to where we can rapidly change. So, Darwin's theory, neo-Darwinism, says, well, the way evolution happens is it's random mutations and survival of the fittest. No, that isn't the way it happens. That isn't, if you did it that way, it would be impossible to get the diversity that we have in life right now. So this is the way adaptation can take place very rapidly, is through this mitochondria. But the downside is that they break down as we age. And that's why we age. The mitochondrial theory of why do we get old? Why does everything break? It's really mitochondrial. One of the terms Doug Wallace uses, heteroplasmy. Heteroplasmy means the mitochondria's got mutations that are affecting its ability to make power. So as more and more of our mitochondria become heteroplasmic, then our energy goes down. Mitochondria do more than just make our energy. They make our ATP. They make more than our body weight every day of ATP, which is really amazing. But they also make a majority of our melatonin. we talk so much about melatonin. The melatonin is the key to aging well. So you keep your melatonin intact by minding your circadian rhythm. But we think melatonin, your doctor thinks that melatonin's all made in your pineal gland. Well, that's not true. It's made everywhere in your body. Your mitochondria makes most of your melatonin, and melatonin orchestrates repair and protection of your cells and your mitochondria. So you can see the mitochondria are such a key. They allow complex life. They allow having vibrant energy. And unfortunately, there's a weak point in mitochondria, and that they're the key to our disease explosion today in our world, and they're the key to why we age.
So let's talk about this feedback loop that's actually causing the aging process, causing the mitochondria to break down. And I know we've touched on this in other videos, but one thing that happens, and just to kind of explain that the way the mitochondria actually create energy, is they use hydrogen from the food we eat, the water we drink, and the air we breathe. And they take that hydrogen and convert it into usable energy for our cells. That's the very basic process. But there's a rare type of hydrogen called deuterium. It's an isotope of hydrogen that's twice the mass of normal hydrogen. So what happens is, if the mitochondria try to use the deuterium, the heavy hydrogen, as fuel to create the energy, it essentially jams the mitochondria. It gunks up the carburetor. So the mitochondria breaks in theory and can't create the energy. So if we start to accumulate this heavy hydrogen or deuterium, mitochondria start to break at a really rapid rate, and then we lose energy and our body starts to break down. So that's one side of it. We start to accumulate this deuterium, which accumulates almost like a sludge within our cell and within our mitochondria. But then we have all the lifestyle and environmental factors that contribute to the deuterium accumulation, but also damage our mitochondria, from an environmental standpoint, meaning part of the mitochondria's responsibility is to keep that sludge out of the engine, to keep the engine clean. But if they're damaged from outside factors, they can't keep the deuterium out as easily. So then we have this kind of attack from two sides: too much deuterium, and then this bombardment from our environmental and lifestyle factors. So how do we go about cleaning up this negative feedback loop?
Well, the deuterium story is again probably why we age, and there's theories that this contributes to the modern diseases or the diseases of aging, especially things like cancer and diabetes. But the mitochondria really recycle the light hydrogen, and that's an important process. So we recycle the light hydrogen when our mitochondria are working well. When our mitochondria start to slow down, then they actually make the light hydrogen. So they make the light hydrogen, and that starts to decline. And so we start grabbing water that we drink, and that can be part of our problem. Is too many processed foods. They tend to be much higher in deuterium than a food that was made in nature, although there's some foods that are higher in the heavy hydrogen, like fruit. And that's because heavy hydrogen does make things grow faster, and that's why it's thought to contribute to the risk of cancer, because it lets cells divide and grow. So that's part of it. And then the other part of it is our circadian rhythm. The mitochondria make most of our melatonin. So if we're not minding our circadian rhythm and we're exposed to the bright light at night and we don't get the proper daytime light, then our melatonin goes down. So our mitochondria don't repair. Now we can make new mitochondria. So new mitochondria, it's called mitochondrial biogenesis. That is something that we can always do, but that process needs for us to mind our circadian rhythm in the first place.
Yeah, exactly. So there's the processed foods. There's high levels of deuterium in most of the water that we drink nowadays, especially tap water. So these are things, we touch on this a lot more in other videos. So go check out the videos related to deuterium and how to deplete deuterium. But there's a lot of it in our environment, and there's a lot of it in terms of what we're putting into our body. And then again, if your circadian rhythm's out of whack, your mitochondria don't repair properly. And then the whole melatonin issue becomes a bigger problem if your circadian rhythm's not dialed in. So you want to make sure that you're in sync with Mother Earth and in sync with nature, because that's going to keep this process of keeping your mitochondria healthy a lot more sustainable. If you become another lemming off the cliff in our modern environment, your mitochondria will get damaged really quickly. And if you're a mother who's planning on having kids, those damaged mitochondria can be passed down to your offspring. So is that, in your opinion, is that why we're seeing an explosion in childhood health conditions?
Yes, that's definitely, I think, one of the big reasons for the autism epidemic that we're having, and that young kids are getting some of these modern diseases that we used to think of as diseases of aging, and now they're happening in young children. And that's because if the mother has a bad environment, then, and her mitochondria are damaged, then the mitochondria she passes on to her child, or the child's going to start off with damaged mitochondria. So this is why we pay a lot of attention for mothers that are, or pre-mothers that are contemplating getting pregnant. You know, we go, you've got to fix your circadian rhythm. One of the things that makes the mitochondria more efficient is sun exposure. And this is through red light. So you can do it with artificial red light. Trouble with artificial red light is there's so many different lights out there. And, you know, some of them flicker, some of them don't have the right frequencies, but the red light in the sun is always good. And the red light in the sun makes our mitochondria much more efficient at making energy. So one of the big keys is sun exposure. That's why usually you see me doing these podcasts outside in the sun. I'm trying to save my ancient mitochondria and, you know, give me another 10 years. And if you know my story, I really wiped out my mitochondria almost 10 years ago. So there's always hope. No matter how deep you get, there's always hope that you can start the restoration process, build up the melatonin levels to where you repair your broken mitochondria, where you have mitochondrial biogenesis, making brand new mitochondria. So there are hacks you can do that we talk about, like intermittent fasting and exercise and different things that help you stimulate the formation of new mitochondria. We talk about those in other videos.
Yeah, so make sure to go check those out. There's one in particular that I think does a good job of showing you the best protocols to repair your mitochondria and really get your health back on track. That video is called 10 Cutting Edge Health Protocols That Your Doctor Will Never Tell You. So these are alternative protocols that maybe you've never heard of. So I'd go check out that video. That really does focus on getting your mitochondria functioning properly. Now, if you watch that video and you like this type of information and this perspective, and maybe want to consider working with my dad and myself to get your health back on track, to get your mitochondria repaired, and maybe overcome any issues that you're dealing with, you should check out the link. We do have some availabilities in our coaching program where we'll construct a completely tailored program for your unique situation, and then we'll coach you through it and make sure you're implementing everything properly. If not, no big deal either. Just watch the free stuff. Just make sure to implement it, because the knowledge without implementation is not really going to do you too much good. You got to go take action on this stuff. And like I said, if you need the extra help, we are here to serve you. But is there anything you want to add before we sign off, Dad?
I think minding your mitochondria is a key to health and vitality. And really what we're trying to do, our mitochondria, again, Howard mentioned we have trillions of cells. They can't even estimate how many mitochondria we have because there's so many of them. There can be up to thousands in a cell, like in the heart and the brain cells can have thousands of mitochondria. And mitochondria are constantly fusing and dividing, and they can't even estimate how many there are. But there are hundreds of trillions of mitochondria, a number you can't even imagine in your wildest dreams of how many there are. So you could stop, close your eyes and visualize these mitochondria. We keep learning new things about mitochondria. One of the things we've learned that Doug Wallace figured out, that mitochondria vibrate when they're healthy. And the frequency they vibrate at is 100 hertz. So you have a mitochondria, the whole colony of mitochondria will be vibrating at 100 hertz. And you know what they can do when they're vibrating at 100 hertz? They can burn fat. Now, what's the significance of that? Well, fat is low in deuterium, or the heavy hydrogen. So when you burn fat, you're making your mitochondria more efficient. If your mitochondria will not vibrate at 100 hertz, then you're not going to be able to burn fat. And that's a lot of people. A lot of people cannot, burn fat. And that's why some people can't go without eating for a full day, because they cannot burn fat. So it's a process. You have to improve what's called the redox potential on the mitochondrial membrane. That means the electric charge on the membrane. So the electric charge on the membrane, is a small charge in that little tiny mitochondria. But when you add them all up, add up the mitochondria charge from your whole body, it's a bolt of lightning. 30 million volts. So you've got some unbelievable, I don't know if you've ever seen lightning hit nearby you, how powerful that is. I saw a video where lightning struck a river and it just shot the water out of the river. It was just amazing amount of power. And that's how much you have in your whole colony of mitochondria. Now, the other point is, so many things in our environment that are artificial kill off our mitochondria. So think of all the things, antibiotics. What do antibiotics do? They kill bacteria. What are our mitochondria? Bacteria. A lot of the drugs are bacterial toxins. A lot of all the chemicals we're exposed to in our homes, the stuff they put in Teflon pans and the fluoride in our water, and all these things affect our mitochondria. So our mitochondria are very sensitive. They're sensitive by design because they monitor our environment. They're what allow us to adapt to our environment, as I told you before, about being passed down only on the maternal line, and the bad mutations taken out before they even become a kid. So that's how we can not have a bunch of mutated kids, is the mother takes out the bad mitochondria before conception. So mitochondria are a key. It's not easy to mind all the stuff. It gets really complex. There's levels, some things are more important than others. Things like glyphosate, which is in all the processed food now, that's the weed killer that they use on crops. Glyphosate harms our mitochondria. That's the big problem with it. That's why you don't want it in your body. That's why you want to eat organic, even though it might have some glyphosate, the Roundup. You want to keep that as low as possible to give you the most time on this earth with the most energy.
Exactly. There's a lot to consider, and this is all different. Everyone has different exposures. There's not a one size fits all approach when it comes to protecting your mitochondria or even repairing the mitochondria that you've already damaged through a lifetime of not doing things properly. So again, if you want us to go through what you're doing with a fine-tooth comb, put a plan together for you and coach you through it, we do have some spots available in our coaching program. And again, if not, just go implement this and start doing it as soon as you can. I think that's it for this video. We've gone pretty long. We have tons of free content on our YouTube channel and our Facebook fan page, Quantum Possibility. So go check that out, and we'll see you on the next video.